I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. Glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. Well, we're in the thick of it now. This is winter in Minnesota. Get ready to enjoy it, embrace it, have a good time with it. Pleased to have on today's program sort of a novel idea, something that I found quite fascinating. I got a press release from the city of Minneapolis saying that the city is going to do a program that's going to help 200 low-income families become more financially secure by providing them with monthly payments of $500 over a period of 24 months. And the program is being referred to, I think, as the Guaranteed Basic Income Program. Mark Brenda is here from the city of Minneapolis. He's a manager of Minneapolis Employment and Training. And here to talk about that, Mark, good afternoon. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane.
Good afternoon, Mr. McFarlane. Thank you so much for having me, and to the listeners, thanks for listening this afternoon as we get to talk a little bit about the pilot program that you just mentioned, the Guaranteed Basic Income Program. So I'm excited to talk about it today.
Well, jump right in. I mean, I think it's a fascinating idea. I had read about initiatives like this in other markets, I think at least a couple of places that I knew of, but wasn't aware that one was in development here in Twin Cities, here in Minneapolis. So I was surprised. I say pleasantly surprised to see that that people have organized and planned and have created the resources to at least try it out. So talk about the genesis of the idea. And in the process, what the mission is.
Absolutely. You're exactly right. This is a newer concept. It is being piloted across the country in a few different places. So let me just give a little bit of framework around what Guaranteed Basic Income is sort of meant to do. Guaranteed Basic Income has been a process, a thought, as a good idea to layer in income supports for low-income people. So rather than thinking about it as part of a welfare system or part of sort of the tax code, that in fact there is that government makes you whole with a basic income, that all residents, in theory, if we were to adopt this at a large scale, national scale, all residents would be sort of brought to a certain level, and then anything above that you make, but it makes a family whole. And then you come off of the program as your income increased. The idea of this having a national program rollout doesn't seem like it's going to happen anytime soon. So what ended up happening, and we've been seeing this across the country, that progressive cities have been spearheading this. And Stockton, California was the first. Their mayor, when elected, really put a lot of effort into this. Stockton has a very large, low income, high poverty community, and he felt that this could really turn the tide for some of my community. And so he invested in this project called Guaranteed Basic Income Stockton, and they are the first out of the gate. They launched it a few years ago. We are starting to get sort of data around how families and individuals are able to use these funds to stabilize their families. But as that project was getting rolling, there are many other cities that have started to think about it, whether it be Portland or Los Angeles. We've heard from Pittsburgh. We've heard from other cities, Chicago as well, Denver, I believe, and Minneapolis and St. Paul both are now launching theirs. St. Paul is ahead of us. They used some of their CARES Act dollars to launch a small GBI program for some folks that had been part of another City of St. Paul project. And when the Recovery Act dollars from the federal government came to the Twin Cities and came to Minneapolis, our mayor and then the city council voted on this and acted on this to create GBI in Minneapolis. And so what we're looking to do here is to provide 200 families in a 2-year pilot program, $500 a month for those full 24 months. So it equals out to about $12,000 over those 2 years. And so we're looking for applicants, and that's the phase we're in now. I wish I could say it was larger, but we're really piloting it with 200 families using these funds. And the idea really is about building access to stability, and then a family's ability to then make the next step, whether it be investing in any number of things, whether it be they need childcare resources or a reliable automobile or rent supports. But we're not telling families how to spend the money. This money comes to those 200 pilot families each month to do what they need to do with it. So it is about assigning and giving agency to these families who know how to spend their money and to budget how they need it. So we're excited to launch it. I can talk about all the details, but I wanted to give you guys a little bit of background to what we're diving into here.
So what's the criteria? How does a person apply, number one, and what will determine if person A versus person B gets enrolled in the program?
So what we've set out to do is, in this first round of within this pilot phase, we've looked at neighborhoods, zip codes specifically, that really have had a long history with high poverty levels, high unemployment, areas that have really seen sort of systematic and structural barriers to any number of economic advantages or economic opportunities. And so we've put some zip code restrictions around it. Those are listed on our website. I won't list them all here, but those 9 are, most of them are sort of core Minneapolis neighborhoods: North Side, South Side, Central South Side, into Cedar Riverside, and a little bit into Northeast Minneapolis. The other criteria is that you meet an income guideline of what we're calling 50% area median income, which essentially establishes about a family of 4 with an annual income of $52,000 or less. And there is a scale, and we've got that mapped out. And then the third criteria that we're layering onto this, and we're trying to keep it as simple as possible, is that you've been negatively impacted by COVID over the last 1.5 to 2 years. And knowing the communities that we're speaking to, the community at large currently going through so much, and Omicron now, in our communities, that won't be a particularly hard criteria to meet, considering so many people have been economically impacted, whether it be increased childcare costs, loss of hours, whatever it might be. So those are really just the criteria to apply for the program. We have the application up. It's open till through the end of December. And we're asking folks to fill it out if they feel they meet those criteria. We've kept it simple. It shouldn't take more than a few moments to finish. And then you will go into a pool of applicants, and then we will randomly bring 200 households into the pilot project.
What's your guesstimate for the likely response? What have other cities experienced? And you got 200 slots. What do you think the demand is going to be?
Many, many thousands. We know that within the targeted zip codes, we know we have many households and many individuals who meet this income criteria, as well as been impacted by COVID. And so we know the demand is going to be high, but we didn't want to limit our outreach. We want families to know about this. We want to know that this is a pilot, but what we want to show is that there's potential activity within this. There's potential long-term ramifications. So we wanted people to know about it. We want people to apply. And yes, it is 200 families or 200 individuals and households. But we just really hope that we have lots of folks who've taken interest in this, and then we can show proof of concept, and that over the 2 years we can see the impacts this makes on our communities, and advocate and lobby for a continuation of a program or adaptation of a program.
Eric Hansen's joined us. Eric is the Director of Economic Policy and Development with the City of Minneapolis. Eric, good to see you, my friend. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well. Thank you for having me today, Mr. McFarlane.
Please call me Al. Thank you so much. I'm wondering what, Eric and Mark, so the program, let's say, is successful. You establish and meet the metrics or exceed the expectations. Then what do you do? Do you see this rolling out citywide, statewide, metro-wide? What is the long-term potential desired effect of an initiative like this? And then, Eric, briefly, tell me how this figures in. The thing I've heard you say a few times that I love you for saying is that a lot of the things the city is doing right now, a lot of the things Minneapolis undertakes at the moment, are things that are centered in equity, driven by equity. How does this figure into that desire for the city to be equitable?
Yeah, this guaranteed basic income project is a game-changing program, and we're very fortunate to have the federal funding to pilot this, and to what Mark said, prove the concept. But ultimately, in 2 years, we'd like to have enough evidence that shows that this is going to change the economic condition of people that are, haven't been fully participating in Minneapolis's economy, and get them out of the cycles of poverty we see. And to your point about, and what does that mean? We would like to expand it. We do not want to see disparities in Minneapolis. Our city goal is to reduce just to eliminate disparities across racial lines. And our programs are all designed with that intention. And this one is at that route. We trust Minneapolis families to do the right thing with this money. We know that expenses hit people in different ways, and so we want to have as much flexibility as we can so that they're stable and they're moving up the line. So to the point about the AMI limit, for comparison, that's 50% of the area's median income, or $52,000 for a family of four, is about the average income of a Black family on the north side. Mm-hmm. And so we are showing that the poverty rate, we see the poverty rate highest in Black and Indigenous communities in Minneapolis. We see the educational attainment rate, the gap, the highest with those communities as well. And if we're not investing in families that haven't had the opportunity to fully participate, we're not going to see those disparities change. And so this is I think is an efficient use of funding. It's much more efficient than trying to get folks through, workforce training after the age of 25. And it will have educational impacts because people will be more stable in their housing. They'll be more stable in their, just their day-to-day lives. And we should see over time long results. So 2 years is just not enough time to do this program. So we had new city council coming in and the mayor. We previewed it with them yesterday that in 2 years, we're going to have to come to you and ask, how can we continue this program and do far more than 200 families. So in those 9 zip codes, for example, we sent a mailer to every single household, and we send over 88,000 of them. Mm-hmm. So if you do the math, it's just even a drop in the bucket, what we can do now, but we need to put the drop in the bucket and then hopefully continue to fill the bucket.
What's the cost of the pilot?
We have $3 million in the American Rescue Plan, but this is going to cost a little over $2 million.
And when you come back to the city council, the mayor, in 2 years, what do you envision an expanded program might cost? Are you envisioning going from 200 to 1,000, for example?
It's going to be, with programs like this, the need is high. Mm-hmm. And so it's as many resources as we can get. So it's hard to say what that magnitude will be between now and 2 years from now. We are having conversations, learning from cities like St. Paul and other regions, and Mark can get into that a little bit more. But we're this is the forward-thinking program around the country, and so we're starting to make connections with those programs and philanthropic organizations and see what that outcome could be. So I would say we'd have to increase it by multiple millions of dollars and on an annual basis in order for us to really see the change that we need to see. But right now, it's give us as much money as we can get.
Got it. I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane, talking to Eric Hansen with the City of Minneapolis Economic Policy and Development Program, and his colleague is Mark Brenda, manager of Minneapolis Employment and Training. Mark, are you related to Mike Brenda by any chance?
I am. He's my dad.
Small world. I mean, this just shows you how time goes. Your father helped me start Inside News. A generation ago. You must have been a kid at the time, or maybe not.
I was,
born.
But I know that story well.
Okay, great. Well,
so I'm honored to be on this call with you.
Well, I'm honored to have you on the call, and that's kind of how we're all connected at the same time. I'm going to bring 2 more voices in. You guys can hang out as long as you want to. You're welcome to be here, but we're going to take the conversation and broaden it to talk about how wealth building looks from within our community. I'm pleased to have David McGee, who is the leader of Build Wealth Minnesota, and Alfred Babington Johnson, who's the leader of the Stair Step Initiative, Stair Step Foundation, His Works United. And they're here in part because of news broke this weekend in the Star Tribune over their organizations organizing, collaborating to effect the purchase of the what's called the RAC, Regional Acceleration Center. I called it the Thor Building. It was built by Thor Construction, and I think people in the community refer to it in a loving way as the Thor Building. But it is a monument for and symbolizing progress and economic development and collaboration. One story before I bring in Brother Babington and Brother McGee is that I drive by this building 4 or 5 times a day. I live in the neighborhood. This is my neighborhood at Plymouth and Penn. And once one of my friends was on a bicycle, the hole was in the ground. They were starting the construction. And the guy said, Al, look at that. Look at that. What do you mean? I look at it every day. He said, this is the pyramid for our community. And so this imagination of what a monument can and should be is what emerged out of a neighborhood, an intersection that has a history of commerce and enterprise. And the building is a source of pride. Plymouth Avenue is a source of pride and will continue to be so. And the work of these gentlemen, Brother Babington and Brother McGee and others, continue to reveal the aspiration and the possibility, the power of collaboration in our community. Let me go to you first, Babington. Thank you for being here. Good to see you. Congratulations to you and David for making the deal happen that brought your organizations together to purchase, to acquire, and to continue the Regional Acceleration Center. Talk about it, if you would, Brother Babington. You might be muted. You're muted. There we go.
Did you contrive to mute me?
That's impossible. It can't happen. Go ahead.
So, first of all, thank you very much, Al, for asking us to come and share this time with you, my dear long-term friend and collaborator. Good to see you, Eric. God bless you. And I'm not sure that I met you before, Mark, but God bless you as well. In any event, I want to say to begin with that both David and I share more than this space on Penn and Plymouth. We also share a faith in God and a belief that He orchestrates all things, and that He, in fact, was the one that put this together and allowed it to be so. Really think of this as a very, very important thing for our community on several levels, and you alluded to some of them already. Love to hear the story that you told. Love to hear that you passed by and are able to look on this with some sense of pride, because we feel that what Richard Copeland did when he moved his headquarters, chose to move his headquarters to Penn and Plymouth. You know, I think we've all heard many, many stories of how various municipalities seek after companies to come and take place within their boundaries. So I'm sure Richard had other options, perhaps much more lucrative than this, but he chose to come to Penn and Plymouth and make a mark and take a stand. And I don't feel reluctant to say that David and I share, because we've talked about it, a real sense of the importance of reclaiming the narrative of what he began when he came and put this stake in the ground. And so we are just delighted to be able to help to reclaim a very, very important narrative.
David, what is the Build Wealth proposition, first of all? And from your point of view, how were you and Brother Babington able to create this collaboration that resulted in the acquisition of this important piece of real estate and construction?
Well, yeah, thanks for having us as well, Al and Eric, and nice to see you, Mark. And no, we were just blessed, and we have to say to God be the glory on this opportunity. Bill Welf was one of the smaller anchor tenants that Richard had invited us to be a part of this from the beginning. So we were one of the first tenants that said yes, we want to move into the space. As you know, we work with families to help them build sustainable social and economic wealth. And we've been doing that effectively for about 17 years, and now 13 years on this corner, as we were in the Urban League across the street for 10 years. And so the opportunity, I didn't know. I went to Babington. We've been trying to bring a bank to this corner. And I went to Babington to ask him about a bank opportunity here in the building. And Babington told me that the building was getting ready to be sold and it may leave the ownership of this community. And there may be an opportunity for us to put something together to actually acquire this. And I'm a banker, been a banker most of my natural life. And I'm familiar with New Markets tax credits. And we started chipping away at the possibilities of making a viable offer to purchase the building with the help of Lisk and some really sharp attorneys over at Frederickson and Byron and some others, and U.S. Bank, and was really instrumental, and Old National Bank over Wade Alexa over at Old National Bank. Mm-hmm. We all got together and we had multiple meetings chipping away at opportunities to acquire this and not let it leave the hands and the ownership of this community. And it worked out in our favor. Like I said, God be the glory, because it really is a miracle deal that took place. And I know I seen the article, and it was quiet. Mm-hmm. You know, you were around when they unleashed the first occupant, patient of the building, and everybody was there. But this is nice and quiet. It moved real well, and it happened without a lot of interference, without fanfare, as the article said. But the deal got done, and the community still owns this property, and that's a miracle.
You mentioned LISC. What's LISC stand for?
It is the local
initiatives.
It's the Local Initiative Support Corporation.
Support Corporation, correct.
We use the acronyms all the time. It becomes shorthand for us, but I wanted to give them proper acknowledgement. And so let's talk about two things, David and Babington. Talk about collaboration. I think that what you've done is demonstrated the power of our people, of Black men and women, Black people, Black institutions, to collaborate, to have shape a call forth a vision of what could be, to examine challenges, problems, but to approach them as solution makers. And so you all examined a problematic situation because of the turns in the market and other challenges that the original builders and owners of the building had, and brought a solution that you say is miraculous. But unpack that a little bit, because I think talking about collaboration is really key. Babington, how does collaboration fit into this, and what does it mean? What are you showing by executing this opportunity?
Well, thank you, Al. I think I first met David, and he'll help me here. I'm thinking 20 years. Has it been more or less than that, David?
Yeah, I think it's been more, somewhere in that 2022. Yeah.
But one of the occasions that we first interacted was when Valenti was governor, and he pulled together a group of folk, and he had this aspiration, a published aspiration, that say, I think, that they were going to increase the home ownership of people of color by X%. you know. And at the time, I said to him and others, I said, this is not a very meaningful goal, because just the growth in population is going to accomplish what you're talking about. But the question is, at the end of the day, will you have done anything to close the disparities? You know, you need to shape the goal to attack the problem, not just to check a box, if you will. But anyway, but David and I both were members of this group that had been impaneled, and you know, David then as now, very focused, very aware of details. As he said, he described himself as a banker. You know, he's all of that. Could easily be a bank examiner. But in any event, so we met, that was one of the meetings, but I think we'd actually even met before that when he was doing some entrepreneurial things. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is this was no overnight coming together. You know, over the period of years, you get a chance to kind of see people, understand them, find out whether or not you share values. And I think from the beginning, it was clear to me that we did, in fact, share values. He was absolutely committed to the advance of our people, really clear about the fact that wealth building was a major part of that. That, you know, in these United States of America, you can talk a great game, but if you can't operate in some ways in the capitalistic system, people don't really want to hear very much of what you have to say. So he had committed himself, and I could see that clearly, both to helping people individually build wealth, but then also he had this dream, aspiration, which I share with him and I support him in, of actually developing a bank, you know, that was ours, meaningfully, not just in some superficial way. So I think the collaboration ultimately, Al, as I think the collaboration that you and I have shared, is a collaboration of values, a collaboration that is about commitment, a value that is around demonstrated consistency and persistence. You know, so I think those were the seeds on which we were able to come together and have enough belief in one another to actually enter into partnership going forward on this.
David, what did it mean for you? How would you respond to the same question?
I just think that there's some, you know, there's some value propositions that we both had shared, and community was key. And we had been engaged in a number of different collective opportunities and collaborations along the years. But it just seemed like we had the ability to do something very deliberate in this, and try to keep stay above the fray. And it was very critical that we collaborated in a way. And even the gentleman who came to do an article with us, to not disparage the Copeland family.
Amen.
And to get into any negatives. Richard Copeland and his family have done miraculous things here in the state of Minnesota, Las Vegas, Haiti, around the world. They've done some wonderful things, and he set the stage for legacy to be here. So it was very delicate the way we tried to collaborate in this without bringing in a bunch of people who wanted signage and, you know, who could disparage his work and disparage this opportunity as well. So this took you know, we're in an area, Minneapolis can be a different kind of place when you're trying to bring together something that's effective and it's of legacy and it has Black people in it. There's so many ways to try to disparage that opportunity. And so this took a kind of a very deliberate way of collaborating quietly to get this done with the owners and with the key stakeholders that heard us and seeing where we were going and could see the future, and us being the owners and us keeping this as a community partnership. And I think the collaboration with LISC stepping in and watching banks, you know, banks, I'm a banker, and we really go by numbers. It's cut and dry. It's either 2 and 2 adds up to 4 or you don't get the deal done. We had some banks really look beyond that and looked at some of the value propositions for this community with Old National Bank and US Bank stepping up and really looking at the value propositions of collaborating to bring this deal to allow us to be owners.
I want to ask you both to kind of walk back through memory lane, I guess would be the right way to say it, Babington, and talk about the challenges that somehow you've been able to navigate through and around. Maybe it's the times that we're in. I call this the post-George Floyd era, that everybody and everything is influenced by the awareness, the consciousness, the horror, the horrific display of how inhumane we are capable of being, and how deadly sometimes and destructive and consistently failing institutions that we rely upon, how consistently failing they are when it comes to the lives and aspirations of Black people. And Babington, I just remember that for years and years, I'm speaking as a reporter, as an observer, we'd have experiences of different people trying to organize projects and opportunities and collaborations, but as often as not, coming under a certain kind of malevolence, criticism, hostility, sometimes direct, sometimes indirect, but the consequence was the same, and that is the failure of projects, and more than the failure of individual projects, the creation of an understanding that anything anybody Black tried to do in Minneapolis was doomed to fail. And I call that a reflection of the spirit, this concept, this quiet, they call it Minnesota nice, supremacist white supremacy thought. So I'm throwing the bricks. You don't have to, but comment on my observation, if you would, Babington, and how this project, because of the time, or because of the learnings, or because of the shift, even in the white community, are things different that allow this collaboration to emerge the way it has.
Well, Al, I think of this time that we're living in as a extraordinary time. And even though people say history sort of repeats itself, I think the intensity of the currents that we are met with in this period of time are unrivaled historically, even. And two major events, certainly the George Floyd, the witnessing of the murder, the witnessing of the inhumanity of that moment, but this pandemic, which was the backdrop to everything for now 2 years and counting. I just was talking to someone recently in the Minnesota Department of Health about what we're dealing with, and I said, the Haitians have an expression that is apropos to this season, and it is, after the mountains, more mountains. So yes, surely in a season of challenge, with challenge on before. But Al, what I have come to believe, and I think your life personifies this as well, is that challenges really are disguises for opportunity.
That's right.
In the midst of however difficult situations might be, the ability to look in and see what the opportunities there are for advancement are part of the blessing of the moment. And again, I think with both David and I, this issue of, as bad as it is, God is in control, carries me through a lot of things. It allows me a continuous sense of optimism. And so I think, Al, the question gets to be, what are you about? What are your values? What are your aspirations? And are you able to kind of bring those to focus in the season of challenge? And the thing that you and I have shared from back when we started StairStep, the goal of StairStep is rebuilding community. Community, I believe, is the challenge of our times. And we talk about community as the way people behave when they believe they belong together. Well, a lot of good comes of that, accountabilities and helps and what have you. And so In the middle of this, the question is, are there opportunities here to revitalize, to energize the spirit of community in the midst of the challenge? And that has been my experience in these 2 years, is that in some ways we've had a greater opportunity than ever to show the efficacy of collaboration, whether that's the church network, in which in this season, when people need so desperately hope and help, it's an opportunity for the churches to step forward and be about the mandate, be about the community and the kingdom building, and so this particular transaction has been another opportunity, and I really do love the coverage that this has gotten so far, because as David mentioned, the headline when Neil St. Anthony first wrote this story was about quiet collaboration and 2 nonprofits. Hallelujah.
I'm holding up the cover or the story in the Star Tribune.
Yeah.
And the beautiful part is it shows the building. And
So,
it also has a good headline, $10 million Northside deal keeps Rex ownership local. My memory is that this project was about a $28-30 million development. 36 million
construction.
Right. And it's key part of an over $100+ million investment on the corner of Plymouth and Penn. Significant, setting the stage for a future, I believe, of entrepreneurship, of service, of prosperity. I recall, Babington, that when I first came to town, I think maybe in 68, 69, there was a gas station on the corner of Plymouth and Penn. There were 2 gas stations, one on that corner, which is the southeast corner, and there was also a gas station on the northeast corner, and some shops, a drugstore where the
Desnick Drugs.
Yeah, Desnick's, and then a bunch of small shops, I think, where the Urban League building is right now. And I watched that lot go from being the gas station to, at some point in time, becoming a McDonald's. Jim Anderson created a McDonald's there. It lasted several years. It didn't sustain itself. And then the ground lay fallow for almost 10, 12, 13 years until new development came. And this is the consequence of that. So I've watched this development happen over a long period of time. Talk about what Stair Step Foundation has been doing in that same period of time. You probably were launching the Stair Step idea at about the same time back in 19, I'd say. I'm thinking you launched Stair Step in about 74, 75, 76. I could be wrong. Does that sound right?
Well, actually, in January of 1992.
92 was for Stair Step.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was born before that, though.
Well, what I'm saying, you were doing this work in the 70s. That's what I'm saying. And so, because you and I met when you and I were both organizing. I was about to launch Insight Magazine, and you were creating
NAMC.
NAMC. Yeah. So we've met this a long time.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, but yeah, and again, and that's the same is true of David. I mean, I think we've all kind of had. Excuse me. Whew, hallelujah. My God, excuse me. We've all been on this journey with a serious commitment to try to help our people for the kingdom's sake. It's a step beyond. And so the particular task that's in front of us may change and shift, but the intention is always the same. How do we move forward? How do we lift above the negativity? From without and within.
Mm-hmm.
We have enough negativity coming from the outside that we have to intentionally raise the esteem of our people. And I'm so grateful for this, and I'm glad for the picture you show. This is some structure Richard built here.
Yeah.
This is some structure. This is a monument, in the community, an anchor, and then to see Estes on the other side. And by the way, now by God's grace, the street on both sides is named for two giants.
Mhm.
from Penn to what is it, Russell is Richard Estes, or Estes, I forget the particular name of it, but it's Richard Estes, the name for him.
Mhm.
And from Penn to Oliver is the Richard Copeland Way.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
And the way I'm suggesting to you is about commitment and vision and leaving a legacy, making a mark.
Eric, I'm gonna have you and Mark jump in here as well, because I want to
Sure.
see how this looks from your point of view as a person in city government. You've heard me and others like me criticize whether the city has been sincere, whether the downtown business establishment has been sincere, whether the moneyed interests in the city have been fair, equitable, intentional in responding to, engaging, in creating and supporting opportunities originated in our community. I think things are different, as Babington just said, but how does it look from you when you use the lens, your lens, to look at community? How does it look to you?
Yeah. Well, I want to go back to what you said earlier about maybe the Minnesota nice. That's totally true. I mean, the city of Minneapolis has historically not been inclusive. I mean, we just haven't, and that's a journey the city has been on since its inception. I had the good fortune of meeting Babington early in my career, and he gave me some advice that I've taken, in stride since we met. And I think that's like getting up to 20 years now. The property that where the building is sitting, that was owned by the city. When that McDonald's was torn down, it wasn't 12, 13 years. It was more like 20 some years before that building came. And there were a number of interests to do things that weren't going to have a legacy that you see at that corner. And it is an amazing building, and it is a testament to Richard Copeland to do that project, because I can tell you, knowing how development works, he was probably told multiple times that was a bad idea. And so when you talk about this time, I think there is a collective change in perspective after George Floyd was murdered, but that can come back, that can swing right back into a comfort zone, and there's going to be a lot of folks that are like, didn't we just do that? We did that. We can go back, right? But I look at the long-term arc, and is the city going to stick with it? Is the moneyed interest going to stick with it? Who knows? But it's all about the people who are representing the city and working. I know Mark lives these truths as well, but my experience has been around how do we support those who haven't been at the table? And this is one of those projects. But I look at the ownership of the north side. You look at Devin George buying property from the city on the corner of Glenwood and Penn. You have this property, Estes city property on Penn and Plymouth. Jamez Staples purchased a building from the state of Minnesota on Plymouth and Emerson. We were able to help renovate a building that, about 10 years ago, but what Kenya McKnight bought at 1200 West Broadway. We saw during the unrest last year, when local Black-owned businesses were, when buildings were burning down, people were standing in front of those local Black-owned businesses with rifles and saying, "You're not going to come here." And so we're seeing some of that. But sorry, my dog's barking here. But one of the commonalities of those stories I was telling you is city ownership. Hold on a second.
Okay. There we go. Let's
So
got it. Okay.
I just want to finish my thought here. I'm sorry. Is the city owned all those properties and they were vacant and boarded for decades, and so the city has changed, but went a little bit through that journey and found community owned Black owners for those, and that's what I think is the long term. Are we going to stay this quote unquote woke? I don't know. I'm going to continue to help as much as I can, but as long as we get the real estate in the hands of community ownership, we're going to be better off long term. Sorry about
David,
the dog.
no problem. David, let me have you jump in here. So I'm impressed that your education initiative affects individuals and individual families, and you are building wealth in the community, one household, one person at a time. And so you're translating the principles of equity, of acquisition, of self-reliance, of understanding credit, understanding money. And so as you do that, what expectations are you creating? I'm thinking you're creating a sea of people, a fabric of community energy that is both capable and self-aware, and that is prepared to knit itself into new possibilities, new structures, new manifestations of the power of community, of culture, of things that reflect both our history, the historicity of our presence, but also a future, the futures that we can imagine. What do you think, David McGee?
Yeah, right now we've been really working on generational wealth creation through education and teaching folks about systems, good and bad systems, and the conditioning that we've gone through all the way back since slavery. There's some conditioning that's been going on that we're starting to unlock and reveal and help families understand how systems operate intricately, and seeing themselves in them and seeing where they're not in them and seeing how they can use systems to help their families begin to build wealth and to literally build themselves away from the stripping of wealth. There's systems that have been set up for generations that have stripped wealth, and sometimes it gets to a place where we've almost been lulled to sleep in them. And so we've been locked in generational poverty. And we're starting to see families start to understand systems and opportunities for growth and ownership. And, we got, we're working on an initiative now to try to get 9,000 Black families in home ownership over the next 5 years, called 9,000 Equities. Minneapolis has the worst, I hate to go here, but they have the worst disparities in the country. 19% home ownership rate for Black families in the city of Minneapolis, and the state as a whole is near 77% for white families. And we look at side by side.
How do you explain that? I mean, why and how does that exist?
A number of things. I mean, there's been redlining, and there's been deed restrictions. There's been a host of different things. There's been a lack of education, the gap in income, employment. There's a host of different things that have all been a part of the gap. And there's also some systems that have been in place that are not trying to address closing the gap. And so we've been pretty deliberate. We found them. Being a banker, I've been an underwriter for most of my banking career, and that's the person who decides whether or not you're eligible to have a mortgage. And so we've been designing some different culturally sensitive lending products. Underwriting criteria was created for white families. It wasn't really created for families that have had some of the struggles and have had some of the histories that Black families have. So you almost have to re-examine and create a new systemic opportunity for more families to get into home ownership. And we're uncovering it. We're working with Bremer and some others to help us open up opportunities to put more families into home ownership. But it's going to take a whole bunch of people. You mentioned collaboration earlier. In the city, I've been working with the city of Minneapolis, and they've been working aggressively here lately. The mayor's given us some money to kind of launch that. They've been allowing us to do some infill development and create affordable housing. And there are a number of different initiatives that they've been, I think, a little more deliberate here lately than they've had in the decades prior to now to kind of really address this. And we're looking forward to continuing this opportunity to get more and more families into ownership positions to start building up that kind of legacy. It's not just, we're trying to talk about 9,000 families and homes, but we're talking about 9,000 families and 9,000 homes that are setting up 9,000 legacies, because to own a home is just not to own a house. There's the ability to set the legacy for your family if trained properly and educated properly on how to leverage, that equity in order to never look back and begin to replicate that for generations to come, which begins to start really getting at that disparity gap. We hope to set the pathway for it to close. We're doing it at 15%, and hopefully we set the pathway. It may not happen in our lifetime, but our goal is to set the pathway where there's parity in home ownership here in the state of Minnesota.
And so your goal is to do what per year? You said what's 15%?
Right now we're trying to do 9,000 over the next 5 to 7 years. So we should be looking at close to 1,000 year one and 1,000 year two, and then we will be jumping up to 2,500 to 3,000 a year thereafter to get to this 9,000. And we've got some really good. We work with about 1,200 families a year. In collaboration, we work with another 2,500. We also found an opportunity where there are 11,000 Black families where we have the ability to get them into home ownership with a model and a system that had been created back in 1989 and hasn't been used here in Minnesota, but it's being used in other parts of the country, and it's working. And you'll hear more about that, and looking forward to being in your paper around that one. But there's some opportunities that's a system that's sitting here. It's almost like if we were babies and it was a bowl of candy, it's sitting there for us to take and engage in it. And we have some folks that just, for whatever reason, have been reluctant to pull the trigger on that opportunity. And we're here to just uncover it and get busy and start helping families get into home ownership and build their wealth. Income is another challenge. So income is a real big deal we're working on. And then inventory is going to be a challenge, because to find 9,000 houses right now when there's not a whole bunch of inventory is going to be another challenge. And so
or an opportunity.
Everybody on deck.
Babington, what role, you mentioned His Works United, and I wanted to ask you to take a minute to talk about how institutions like the Black Church weigh in and help support this vision, this mission of generational wealth. What do you think?
Well, first of all, absolutely, reinforcing the institutions of our community are critical strategy in building community. And the African American Church has the historic role, and it's ubiquitous. The opportunity is great. And in some ways, there's some relearning that needs to take place with the churches to make the reach. And we are absolutely committed to that, building the musculature of the African American Church. And I'm rushing in a sense, Al, because I'm just wondering if I really wanted to hear, and I thought he was primed to say something. Mark had a commentary, I think, following Eric. Is it possible
Sure.
I get to circle back to the other? I will. But.
Yeah, Mark, jump in.
No, Babington, please finish your thoughts. I can finish up if there's anything that comes to mind.
So the church is critical, and I think the issue, Al, that the Black press is critical. I mean, there are institutions that have to be reinforced in our community for the community to really move forward. It's not enough to just say, here's another one. Here's a little analogy that suggested to me. An airplane, 500 passenger airplane, filled to the gills. It took off, And as it took off, the pilot comes on and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, I have good news and I have bad news. Bad news first. We're crashing into that mountain directly ahead of us. There's no question. We've done everything we can. We're crashing into the mountain. 500 people, middle seats full. Here's the good news. We have 14 parachutes." Really? So what I suggest to you is that's kind of how our society operates. It's as if, we'll save one here and but there's 500 people on this plane. How do we create those systems and those institutions that really serve more broadly? That's hats off to Build Wealth, because it is emerging. David is a quiet storm. It's emerging as an institution in our community. And then if we can collaborate with the kind of power and program that David has, with the African American church being a partner in that, so we're actually building systems that are robust to help to serve the entire community, creating a social infrastructure, if you will.
I know there were some congregations, Babington, that had declared among their missions and community the goal of having all of their members have credit scores in excess of 700. So that makes it really practical and specific and manageable and measurable. And I think that that's a place, an arena for that kind of educating to take place.
Absolutely. But the thing is, it needs David. In other words, the institutions can have the outreach, but then you need the intentional, sophisticated processes that David is creating, and then the marriage together, we get the big win.
You said something a little earlier about learning. I just want to say something. There's a lot of unlearning that needs to go on as well. I'll leave that there.
Mark, we're down to the last couple of minutes here. I want to circle back to have you give impressions, thoughts, feelings, observations.
No, I love this conversation about building Black wealth. And David, I've known your work for 15 years and been following it. This idea of building income, right? And then into wealth, we've got to see those things, hand in hand, that we need to find access to. And that's, let's circle back to the beginning of the conversation. That's what GBI is meant for. We're looking at a project that gives families and households that stability, that in, yes, a 2-year period, it goes fast, but is that enough stability to add education, training, stabilize your household, get your finances in order? Work with Build Wealth, get that credit score looking great, and then exit out of that 2-year pilot into better fortunes for your family. We've got to find ways to really see that access into those spots so that they can become homeowners and that folks can become stable, earners. And so this is all like wrapped up into the same agenda, right? We've got to see how we can build that Black wealth, the north side, south side, and then wealth in our low income communities just broadly.
Well, listen, this has been a great hour, a great conversation. Eric, thank you for what you're doing at the city. Mark, thank you for being here. David, Babington, brothers, thank you so very much for the leadership, the passion that you bring, the passion that you reflect, because that really is the substance of our community. There is a broad and afoot a spirit of accomplishment, a spirit of attainment, a spirit of intentionality, and a sense that victory is both at hand, that it is inevitable, and immediate, that it's about to happen. Babington, go ahead.
Yeah. Did you know, in terms of celebrations, that Tim Baylor just closed on this 112 unit project that he's going to be doing on West Broadway?
I didn't have the detail. I've been watching Tim for a long, long time on the project. I'm aware generally, as a neighbor of his, we signed off on supporting that. Sure. Yeah. But that announcement, you're making it today, right now. Huh? Yeah. Great.
Eric, you have specifics? Eric?
I don't have the specifics about the closing, but I know the city was supportive of the project. That's another example. Tim has been a business owner and investor in the city for years, and a developer. And I bet you if you talk to him, he might give you some insights about the process and what it's like to be a Black developer in Minneapolis, and we had to remove some barriers for them.
Yep. 5 years in the making, Al.
Yep.
I know the story. Listen, we're out of time, but gentlemen, thank you all so much. And let's keep this conversation going. Eric, David, Mark, Babington, we'll see you next time. I'm Al McFarlane. Take care.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.